G'day, May 40 here. I know exactly what you're feeling. You're feeling, wow, I am not worthy to be alive at such an exciting time. I am not worthy to have such a glorious president. I just can't handle so much winning. It is only by God's grace that we get a second Trump term and such high-quality entertainment. And the Zelensky, J.D. Vance, Donald Trump, blow up the White House today. I mean, this is exactly what we voted for. This is beautiful. Let's cut to
and it was
Fox
real,
News.
And there were no walls. And usually that is the situation, but not today.
And not just President Trump, President Zelensky, also Vice President J.D. Vance clearly got involved and very much was in the middle of this. This was an exchange where he jumped in. Listen.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
Today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Kim Strassel still with us. Kim, another remarkable exchange there.
Yeah, you know, I think it's actually worthwhile drilling down. We're focusing on the emotion, but some of the exchanges were really important here. And you go back to the very beginning of this, and it really launched when J.D. Vance jumped in uninvited and gave a kind of lecture about the need for real diplomacy rather than the chest thumping that Joe Biden had engaged in. By the way, I agree with that sentiment. But what happened then was that Zelensky tried to engage on this. And if you listen to what his words, he recounted the many, many, many years of the discussions that have been had with Vladimir Putin where he made promises and then he broke those promises. And I think what he was trying to suggest was, look, there's some real issues here. It's great to come up with a deal, but will it be a lasting deal? The history of this is that Vladimir Putin doesn't abide by any of that. Now, Donald Trump's response to that was, well, that was prior presidents. It was Biden. They didn't respect them, but they will respect me. That may well be true in the short term for 4 years, but he's going to be gone in 4 years. What happens after that? I think there's some legitimate policy discussions that are being had here. It's just really unfortunate that it had to break out the way that it did and so ugly on the public sphere.
Kimberly, thank you for that. Bill McGurn back in our conversation here. And this whole line from J.D. Vance, you went to Pennsylvania in October. It was almost as if that was in the back of his mind when this meeting began, Bill.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake by Zelensky to align himself with the Biden administration. He's made.
Oh, I love the pious tones. I love the funereal tones in the news media discussion. I love the somber attitude. This is hilarious. This is glorious. Look, whatever happens in Ukraine has absolutely nothing to do with America's interests. Zelensky has nothing that America wants or needs. Right? He has no cards. Right? Everything is that Ukraine has been able to do has been enabled by the United States and provoked by the United States. And this idea that Putin cannot be trusted, no more than anyone can be trusted. Let me bring Dooovid here. And Dooovid, let me make this point. There's this frequent discussion that Zelensky can't be trusted. And my point is that all human relationships are incredibly difficult and challenging because we don't fully know ourselves, let alone anyone else. And when the situation changes, people's incentives change. And so there's reason to have skepticism about Vladimir Putin. There's reason to have skepticism about Luke Ford, about Dooovid, about Zelensky. We're all fallible human beings who think differently, operate differently, and reassess our priorities when we change and the situation around us changes. So that there's just an inherent unpredictability in all human relations, not just with Vladimir Putin. This is a favorite theme of mine. I'm not sure if we've discussed it, but any thoughts on the unpredictability of human relations?
Yeah, I think we discussed it multiple times. I constantly explain because my understanding of Jewish law, it's like trust is basically exclusively based on track record and should have very little to do with feelings, your reputation. There's various things that could go into track record, but basically you can't really know how to deal with a person until you've developed a track record. And the best thing to go on with a person is almost exclusively track record. I mean, sometimes there's signs like that, like the gut feeling or whatever. I was hoping to talk about the Michael Wolff book.
We'll transition to that, but just finish
it. Might relate to that kind of distrust of the gut feeling. And the Talmud says you can't know what's on a person's heart. The goal's not to be a mind reader, and especially in politics. If you're talking, I mentioned with Church of Entropy, it's okay. We never actually met in person. For a track record, or okay, me and Luke Ford. I mean, how people would do living together as a roommate or as business partners. Even for that, it's always limited track record, because it's okay, you might have been great friends with this person, might have you work together in social circumstances, but that does not necessarily transfer over to business or being roommates. All of those things independently have to be built up based on track record.
Yeah, and I lead a very segmented life, and I generally don't bring people together from the different segments of my life. I will share quite a bit from my life, but there's also enormous parts of my life that I will not talk about online. I will not share, and people can have no idea what I'm like under particular situations and circumstances, because I just do not go there on the show. So what I present on the show is just a portion of my life and a portion of my personality and a portion of my thinking. All right, I keep vast reservoirs of my emotions, my thinking, my experiences, and my life just off screen, off limits, because I fit my live streaming around my life. I don't fit my life around my live streaming. Anyway, I found the Michael Wolff book on Donald Trump just laugh out loud funny, tremendously entertaining, and it struck me as pretty realistic, and much of it just had the ring of truth. What were your thoughts on the Michael Wolff book?
Yeah, I mean, I guess with all the other books and, because I was kind of in the periphery of Trump circles in 2012, and it's yeah, that's how I remember it. Everyone kind of hates each other, has this air of there's something big that if you mess it up, you're not going to be a part of, and therefore have to kind of accept being mistreated, this constant feel you might be kicked out, and the public embarrassment, the public whipping in order to bear in the circle, the probably only hearing his own voice, the delusion, power seeking. You're really the only people that tried to get in probably in this election cycle were people attracted to the possibility of power and, the new circle. So, the state of incompetency. So, I mean, I think it pretty well summed it up in just his question, well, why do people keep talking to him? And, probably because they want to tell somebody. And also it's probably kind of obvious that that's how it is in Trump circles.
Yeah. Back to the news for a second on Zelensky and Trump. What gets me is the funereal tones in which this was being discussed, this Trump Zelensky, and Tom Wolff put it this way, that journalists very quickly settle on the one appropriate emotional tone with which to react to a news event, and then they all adopt this one emotional tone. Is very much kind of a 19th century Victorian gentleman's approach, and you find, a widespread uniformity in the news coverage that it seems like no matter the network, often from Fox to CBS to MSNBC, often they choose the one emotional tone with which we're to understand this story, and it just seems so fake and artificial compared to real life. And the political scientist that I had on the other night, Michael Cochin, he made this provocative tweet that you can't discuss reality accurately while using politically correct language. And so when you contrast how how real people talk with the stilted presentation of reality that you get from the mainstream media, the legacy media, it's understandable why more and more people are switching to online conversations such as the one that we're having. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just the nature of the medium or conversation. But I mean, certainly, like Zelensky, it was definitely going to be a disaster waiting to happen. There was no way Trump was going to deal with, like Zelensky's kind of like fake bravado, where it's, he just doesn't have like an earned credibility in the Trump sense to be acting like that, even though maybe the media and kind of like Wolff was saying, like Trump is a one-man show. Like Musk is basically the one exception that Trump has allowed that he's predicting will last like 6 months. Although that, like, I might take a different view on Musk like that, but whatever. There was no way Trump was going to accept Zelensky's demeanor, and it became disastrous immediately. And unfortunately, I mean, Zelensky really doesn't have any good options, but like I could see him being completely thrown under the bus, to the point where basically Ukraine is forced to surrender, and he could even be like charged as a war criminal. I mean, because like Trump probably he's a one man show, he's not showing his deference, and he might just get completely thrown under the bus to the extent where I don't know how likely you think it's even possible Zelensky could be brought up on war crimes.
I don't think that's likely, and I don't think that the United States is just going to completely abandon Ukraine. It's just the U.S. wants to push for a ceasefire. Ukraine's obviously not going to get everything it wants because Ukraine's in the weaker position. But
I wouldn't say Ukraine, said Zelensky. I mean, not necessarily completely throw Ukraine under the bus, but completely throw Zelensky under the bus, in the sense that Ukraine could basically be forced to surrender, give up almost all the territory that it's lost and more, some sort of agreement where they'll be defended, but the cost is going to be Zelensky's head on a stake, and like so he'll personally have to take the fall for everything bad that happened, and to the point where he'll have no reprise, he'll have no heroes exit to another place, even to the point where like I said, he could be completely thrown on the bus, charged for war crimes. Not Ukraine itself.
I would be surprised if Ukraine got a new leader who is more amenable to working with Donald Trump. It is a possibility that Zelensky gets charged with war crimes. I hadn't thought about that angle, and so you often say things that I hadn't thought about, and I guess that is possible. One thing that came to mind is the teaching in Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of the Fathers from the Mishnah, and that is pray for the welfare of the government, because without it, men will swallow one another alive. And Jews, in general, in history, have preferred a strong government, even if it's somewhat anti-Jewish, if it will just keep them alive and enable them to keep leading a Jewish life. And it's just inherent in the traditional Jewish approach to life. When you're living in the diaspora, you really do want a strong government, and you wish for it to be strong and to be healthy, and that's why we pray for the welfare of the government. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Jews are generally high authority disposition, and like high trust and expertise, high trust and authority. Maybe up there with almost any other group in terms like, even ultra-Orthodox, in terms like once the vaccination was accepted, almost all the rabbis, almost everyone fell behind the vaccination. In terms like Israel policy, following trust the plan. And also, me and your, dilemma is speaking through a unified voice that's, generally a corrupted form of leadership where, as a good Jew, you're not supposed to voice your own opinion. You're supposed to back up the unified voice that the community chooses. And if that's, the ADL, or if it's some, corrupted rabbi or however the Jewish community picks its leadership, that's also part of, where say me and you we still have Goyish blood running through our veins. and it bothers us much more than your common Jew to allow the mainstream Jewish spokespeople to speak for us.
Yeah, and most people don't have as much time as we do. And so I don't think it's just our Goyish blood. I think it's more that we get to spend a great deal of time online sharing our opinions. And most Jews, particularly traditional Jews, they're just far too busy working, earning a living, and taking care of family. So what do you think about that?
So, like, it's completely our non-Jewish blood in the sense of, like, I mean, in LA or something, if it's what's the name the guy you dislike, the Reckniff or something, the nursing home Orthodox Jew billionaire.
Well, I certainly don't like him, but Bob Recknitz is he's a big philanthropist in LA Jewish Life.
An example. I mean,
he also let me finish. And he owns a bunch of nursing homes, and those nursing homes were subject to government scrutiny and charged with various violations. Back to you.
Well, I'm saying for my experience with even the secular Jewish community, but certainly the Orthodox community, is like people really like someone like Reckness, like his voice is music to their ears. They they'll go to synagogue, they'll hear him speak all the time. They just love it. Like they'll get behind and like, yeah, did you hear what Recknitz said? And, I'm sure there's 100 different spokesmen for the Jewish community, but saying like, no, like I know the Jewish community, even the modern Orthodox community, they listen to the same people speak on their behalf again and again. And they really seem to love these guys. Not that they don't have time. They seem like, I think it's like literally like a Jewish blood type trust and authority. Like these are spokesmen, and not just that they don't have time for anything else. It's just part of the tribal thing. Like, here's our spokesman, we fall behind our leader, and we actually do like what this guy's saying. He actually does speak for us, as we're like, it's me and you. It's literally our non-Jewish blood pumping through us. That's like, this guy doesn't speak for me.
Yeah, I'd strongly disagree. Jews are very difficult to lead. Jews will take issue with their leaders. Many of the most important developments in Jewish life, including in Orthodox Jewish life, have come from lay Jews, not rabbis, including Zionism and the pushback against rabbinic sex abuse and the idea of an ethical kosher code. But let me just think. The reason that Bob Reckness in particular is widely loved is because he has helped hundreds of Jews, right? He is just incredibly helpful, loving, philanthropic, useful. He's there like bailing out so many people during very difficult times. So it's not just something that's handed to him. It's earned through the tremendous amount of chesed, of kindness that he's dealt out. That
could be also, but I'm saying like, okay, even at public events when there's like, like even the local modern Orthodox synagogue, like, if there's going to be a gathering, like, like their coveted rabbi is going to speak, and everyone's just going to kind of like hang off of every word of his and say like, no, I mean, this guy speaks for us, and they want like the local leadership. And it's like, okay, like Recknitz, like, okay, he might earn that through charity and love, but like I think people really do hang off of every word he says, and it really is like music to their ear. And I think that's some sort of tribal high authority trust that, like, as an Anglo-Gentile, me and you just don't have. And even as a convert to Orthodox Judaism, or me as an Orthodox Jew, like, to me, I spent thousands and thousands of times in situations where I was among my fellow Jews who were just like hanging off every word of their leader. And I was like, seriously? And it seemed to me like, yeah, everyone's kind of serious about that. And so I'm tying it up to, to something, blood-wise. But I mean, I'm not sure if you're saying like, no, you don't feel like that. You haven't been in thousands of situations among your fellow Jews where they just all appear to be hanging off every word of their leader, where you're sitting there like, seriously?
No, in fact, I notice that I tend to treat rabbis with more deference than my fellow Jews.
I mean deference, but I'm saying in terms of
Here, let me give you an anecdote while you reflect. So,
community representation and leadership in terms of, especially a representation to the Gentile or speaking to the public.
Well, let me just give you an anecdote. So some Gentile friends of mine were holding an event for retired people, and my friends were vegetarians, and they got up and gave a presentation on vegetarianism and the virtues of vegetarianism. And midway through the talk, one elderly Jew stood up and said, "I've never heard such nonsense in all my life." And my Gentile friend was just absolutely shocked, because no one would ever speak that way in the Seventh-day Adventist world, to just interrupt a speech. So Jews are a tough crowd. Jews are hyperverbal. They're hyper-passionate. They will speak out, and they will be verbally violent in a way that most Protestants in particular will not. So that's
their own leadership. But I'm saying they'll control their own ranks. Saying, like, when's the last time someone did that to, like, your own rabbi in a sermon, or even, like, in any terms, like, even if it's our beloved liberal feminist rabbi or whatever the community, it's a trend that Jews strategically speak through a unified voice, as where, especially like, okay, Anglo or Northern Europeans, it's not a trend. You're saying, like, we don't speak through a unified voice. And as someone who's been in that situation, like, I've always found it, kind of befuddling that, it's like, really? Like, you're speaking to this guy's representative of the unified voice of the Jewish people? And, just seeing my fellow Jews, like, even, various across the board, like, yep, that's our unified voice. Don't mess it up.
Okay, I want to bring you back. I just want to talk on my own for a while about this Ukraine situation. So we'll talk again soon, Dooovid. Thanks for popping on the show.
Okay, yeah, sure. Appreciate you having me on. I guess there was a few different random things to talk about, but
I've got more things that I do want to talk to you about. But right now, I just want to go with the Trump-Zelensky angle.
Okay, so I'll probably catch you on Sunday or next week.
Sounds good, man. Talk to you. Okay, so I'm just finding this whole Zelensky blow up hilarious. Number one, Trump likes a spectacle, and so I don't know how much policy significance you should read into it. And whatever Trump is posting on Truth Social, it doesn't mean necessarily the United States is just going to abandon Ukraine. So we're all going to read into this interaction, right? Basically our priors. Right, our prior beliefs will be confirmed. So my prior belief is that Ukraine does not matter to American welfare, so it doesn't really matter what Trump says, and his relationship with Zelensky doesn't matter. What does matter for America's welfare is that we get out of Ukraine and that we stop antagonizing Putin, because Putin leads the third most militarily powerful nation in the world. They can make our life much more difficult. And so for America's best interests, we need to have some kind of rapprochement with Vladimir Putin and with Russia. Putin is far from the most radical leader. So if Putin dropped dead of a stroke today, the odds are whoever replaces Putin will be far more rabid and far more dangerous and far more militarily adventurous. Now, we don't have to rely on Putin's goodwill to reach a deal with him. We just have to rely on his self-interest. And Russia doesn't even have the military forces to take over all of Ukraine. It naturally makes sense for Russia to take over those parts of Ukraine that are primarily Russian-speaking, and those parts of Ukraine that are not primarily Russian-speaking. It would not make sense for Putin to take them over, and there would just be a giant pain for Putin if he took those parts over, because they would just be in constant rebellion against him. So Trump loves a show, and Zelensky's also comes from an acting background, and so he's also putting on a show. And Zelensky probably has to put on a show about how tough he is and devoted to Ukrainian interests to ensure that he doesn't get assassinated, because there are a lot of hyper-nationalistic right-wing Ukrainians who would be probably quite well disposed to taking out Zelensky if they felt like he wasn't a strong nationalistic Ukrainian. So this war, as wars do, is just fired up nationalist feelings on both sides, on Ukraine's side, on Russia's side. And now with Trump in office, it's a sign of rising American nationalism. And I just don't see what cards Zelensky has, right? What exactly does Zelensky have or Ukraine have that the United States needs? So Here are some posts on Twitter. Trump correctly did one of the most important parts in some negotiations. He walked away from the deal. Walking away from a deal is a step in making a deal. It's not a loss. It's literally a step. People who haven't negotiated before don't know this. This is all part of the dance. Also, it's really cool that the American people get to see a glimpse of what it looks like behind the scene. This was about 10% as heated as negotiations get. This was not only good TV, but it was a great education as well. The most transparent administration is true. Another comment. I'm half convinced that half of Trump's contempt for Zelensky is due to him constantly dressing like he just got out of a Pilates class for middle-aged divorcees. Trump hated the fact that Steve Bannon would always come in dressed badly. If anyone on Zelensky's team had only half a brain, they would have dressed him up in a little toddler suit with a bow tie. Poor Ukrainians. And so Trump was constantly ragging on Zelensky about how he dresses. It was gold. It was gold. Oh, I don't feel worthy to be alive in a time of such comedy gold. You're all dressed up.
Pretty sure. He's all dressed up today.
President Trump, what's your message to Vladimir Putin, sir? President Trump, you got enough. President Trump, you got enough.
Oh, too much winning. You're all dressed up. That's great. Okay. Does Karl Rove have
all right
to
help Ukraine and sanction Russia 3 years ago and continue to do so. We must respect those who have been fighting since the beginning. Also noting, Brett has sent out a note, Brett Baier, saying that the interview he has.
Okay, so yeah, why is everyone talking to Brett Baier of Fox News? So the leader of France, Macron, did that. The leader of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, did that. And now I would assume Zelensky is doing that, but we'll find out if it goes ahead. But let's not forget the final scene from The Apprentice, right? This is Donald Trump.
Everybody wants to win.
Character.
And that's the truth of it.
But that won't read well.
Well, that's the truth of it.
But it's not the truth we're looking for right now. Right now, people need to think there's some sort of special sauce, principles, set of rules that make you different.
Well, that's easy because I have my rules. I got 3 rules, okay? They're my 3 rules of winning. Rule 1, the world is a mess, okay? The world is a mess, Tony. You have to fight back. You have to have a tough skin. Attack, attack, attack. If somebody comes after you with a knife, you shoot him back with a bazooka, okay? Rule 2, what is truth, Tony? What is truth? You know what's truth? What you say is truth, what I say is truth, what he says is truth. What is the truth in life? Deny everything, admit nothing. You know what's true? What I say is true. And third of all, and most important, no matter how fucked you are, you never, ever, ever admit defeat. You always claim victory. Always.
You know, that sounds like the U.S. foreign policy for the past quarter century.
Well, unlike that, this actually works. And I won a lot, Tony. I won a lot, and even when they said I didn't, I still turned it into a win, and that was the difference.
So, how'd you come by these set of rules?
Well, I have an instinct, Tony. I have a killer instinct. I always have. Listen, Tony, you have to have a natural ability. I'm a big believer in natural ability, and a lot of that is genetics. You have to be born with it, you know, and some people aren't, and some people are, and that's the difference.
Yeah, this is great. All right, watch The Apprentice. It's a good film about Donald Trump.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that. Remember this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing cards.
Mr. President.
You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you far more than a lot of people said they should have.
That tense moment, one among many at the White House in the Oval Office with the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, and the president of the United States, Donald Trump. This has now derailed a crucial deal between the two nations, security for Ukraine and U.S. access to those rare earth minerals. All of that is now in flux as we're getting word from the White House through an official there that the president says after all of this, he felt disrespected by Zelensky's rhetoric and demeanor. Welcome back as America Reports heads into hour 2. I'm Sandra Smith.
So I like the comments on X, man. Never leaving this platform. So one bloke says, I've never seen anything like this except on Jerry Springer. So no deal was signed over minerals. Apparently the White House asked Zelensky to leave. So I've heard it's important to share feelings, right? And so everyone got to share feelings, right? Very open dialogue. When did we last see anything like this? Right? Trump is set to order an investigation of fraud and waste in aid to Ukraine. Oh man, this is beautiful. This is glorious. What a wonderful opportunity to be alive. So no press conference between Trump and Zelensky. Talk about an own goal from Zelensky. Did the U.S. just, in effect, stop all support for Ukraine? Is that the implication of Trump's statement? And one observation here. The best part of a Trump presidency is watch his fans be forced to do constant 180s on fundamental political beliefs to continue to agree with a man who changes his mind every 45 seconds. Okay, but this is just all negotiation, and people don't necessarily take Trump literally, right? Take him seriously. Trump speaks for effect, right? Now, do you want to argue with the results? Maybe he has everyone running around but all heading in the direction he wants. Messy, perhaps unsightly, but effective would be a pro-Trump perspective. Trump repeatedly confirmed he's going to continue to send arms to Ukraine, says Michael Tracy, but then Zelensky couldn't resist instigating a totally unnecessary debate with J.D. Vance. And you can see the Ukrainian ambassador. She looks like on the verge of tears after Trump and J.D. Vance went after Zelensky.
Zelensky at one point said, we've been going it alone. He may have been making a reference to, only Ukrainian soldiers on the battlefield, but White House officials took issue with Zelensky's demeanor, not just, what he was saying through a language barrier. They said that he was rolling his eyes and shrugging his shoulders, and that the president at the end of the day felt that he's just not ready for peace, and that the president knows that in order to achieve peace, you're going to have to negotiate with both sides. And he felt that the U.S. support that has been provided so far is putting Zelensky in a position where he feels like he doesn't have to accept peace. And the president really making clear that, that is a gift that has been provided from the U.S. And if you don't act like it matters, this is the result. Zelensky has left the White House, and the lunch that the two sides were supposed to dine on was sitting in the press area. When I went up to ask what was going on, we're told White House staffers are going to eat it themselves. And the president, we expect...
Trump just loves a good show. This is a good show. I don't know how much significance it has. Kip says we should start a men's club for men devoted to truth, but I'd never join an organization that would be willing to include the likes of me. Tim Dillon had a terrific interview with Steve Bannon, and Steve Bannon just completely changes his tune on Elon Musk in this interview.
Into everything. And I go, my God. I said, how many political appointees we got? He says about 40 or 50. I said, well, hey, heck.
Okay, I should back up here.
combination of people.
The Council on Foreign Relations.
It's definitely the outside companies, but it's also the guys like Brennan. It's people who have been here forever, been in the intelligence.
Brennan
community.
is the guy that keeps coming up.
Bad dude.
As a very dangerous individual.
Guy.
He's a dangerous person.
Dangerous, but there's
Clapper's a dangerous
There's
guy.
100 Clapper, Hayden. All those are the guys you see at the very top. Yeah. Right? But they also have coaching trees like Belichick, etc.
Of course.
So it's deep into the apparatus. And this is the thing they have called the interagency.
Did they have anyone in the Trump White House the first one?
Yeah, but so I asked Mike Flynn. I said, look, let me see the charts for this is the first day. I want to see the charts for the National Security Council. When I came off sea duty in the 70s and came back, I came back to the Pentagon to be a special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations, basically a junior officer, Grendoon. This is in 1981 when Reagan's like, the guys in the Pentagon at that time thought the National Security Council ran the world. The National Security Council had 25 people. So you had Kissinger, you had Brzezinski, and then they picked Richard V. Allen because they didn't want some Dr. Strangelove type. Right. Reagan did. That had 25 or 30 people, and the guys in the Pentagon said, these fuckers run the world, right? They're too powerful. Flynn comes back on the first day he goes down with Jared, the president. He's got these charts like this. It's like this thing. I said, Mike, I didn't want to see the entire national security apparatus. I don't see the Pentagon. He goes, no. This is the National Security Council. I go, what? 292 billets. If you look at it, they're into everything. And I go, my God. I said, how many political appointees we got? He says about 40 or 50. I said, well, hey, no offense. We don't know 40 or 50 MAGA guys that step in there right now. We have to get rid of some of these. These are called detailees. They come from the Pentagon. They come from the CIA. They come from DNI. They come from DHS. It's essentially the way the deep state runs the system. They have, think about it, with 292 billets, they have...
Billets meaning...
But slots where a person goes.
Where somebody
goes, yeah. It's 292 bodies, but they have a billet, boom, where they plug a person in. We want to get rid of those.
So they know that new administrations coming in are not always going to have these 200, 300 people.
No, Obama... No, in fact, it's impossible. First off, you don't even have the allocation of political appointees.
But you might have 25.
25.
So that's the thing. So by making it larger...
Yes. And they have a phrase, I call it their fetish. They have a thing called the interagency process. In other words, everything has to go through the CIA's got to sign off, the State Department. You got to remember, the CIA has a military aspect to it. The State Department has an intelligence aspect to it. The deep state is like kudzu, and it's run by the CIA. The CIA controls behind the scenes.
And the CIA is run by the billionaires.
Well, the CIA reports to, first off, an elite class of Americans who have just been, from OSS to the CIA, very Ivy League. When I talk about the credential class.
Okay, some more comments on X. The Trump-Zelensky debate today resembles eerily Khrushchev's kitchen debate with Nixon in 1959. And like then, now the emotional outcome dwarfed any practical objectives. So Trump likes Putin. He just does not like Zelensky. Even though it was widely reported to be a done deal, now it turns out the minerals deal had not in fact been signed as scheduled after the fracas at the Oval Office. Will Zelensky hang around D.C. to figure out some ways of smoothing things over? And word is he went shopping for a suit. Okay, good conversation here with Steve Bannon, right? Who's Trump's id.
The traditional control of the CIA has been kind of the Ivy League. Harvard, Yale, Harvard Law School, yes, Princeton. A little bit of that's changed, but not the mentality. The very mentality is that
Cold War liberalism.
They are the guardians of this republic.
That's right.
Right? And you have these politicians, whether they're clowns like Bill Clinton or neophytes like Obama or dangerous individuals like Trump, they can wander in and out, but they are the guardians of the republic. Very like Plato's guardians. They are the guardians of this republic. America's become a hegemon because of them.
They decide we're going to stay in the Ukraine for 3 years.
First off, they decide why with some, and this is one of the things I told McMasters. He would sit there and go, we got the greatest team and we're going to do all this. I said, dude, you've had Bush, you've had Obama, and now you got us. You've had a center-right group of neoliberal conservatives in Bush. You've had the biggest group of progressives ever under Obama. And I said, we're here for 20 years. I said, you've had smart guys around this table. Why has it never changed? And the reason it never changes that the neoliberal neocons have an apparatus. That apparatus is the deep state. And this is why I say if AOC or Bernie was there, they'd be just as dismissed. This is what eventually impeached Trump. They saw Trump as such a danger. This was the whole Russia hoax. This was a guy named Colonel Derek Harvey and an Army sergeant called Higgins were two brilliant guys that understood this. They actually went through and came back and made a presentation. Here are the deep staters that actually are in the National Security Council, right? Here's who their names are in rank order. The ones who should.
What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring it into this conflict.
So what I think is really important to understand, Martha, and what is relevant is the context by which those comments were given.
Okay, let's get back a little more from Steve Bannon.
Should be turfed out. The number one name was this Eric Camarillo guy who eventually was the whistleblower on the Trump call to Ukraine. The guy, the original whistleblower, was a guy that 2 years before.
Remember, your video would get struck if you even said his name, Eric Camarillo. All right, I don't know if that's still in force on YouTube. All right, all the social media would delete your content if you said the name of the whistleblower. Right.
They identified as one of the most dangerous guys because he's a deep stater.
I love
such a danger.
Right,
this was the whole Russia hoax. This was a guy named Colonel Derek Harvey and an Army sergeant called Higgins were two brilliant guys that understood this. They actually went through and came back and made a presentation. Here are the deep staters that actually in the National Security Council, right? Here's who their names are in ranked order, the ones that should be turfed out. The number one name was this Eric Camarillo guy who eventually was the whistleblower on the Trump call to Ukraine. The original whistleblower was a guy that 2 years before they identified as one of the most dangerous guys because he's a deep stater.
I love.
All right, this is Elon.
Elon understood it first, given his engineer's brain, and really backed our play.
So Steve Bannon was calling Elon evil, like Steve Bannon was on a jihad against Elon. Now in this new interview, Steve Bannon is consistently praising him.
But the rest of them hung out until 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 5th of November when Pennsylvania fell. When Pennsylvania fell, Zucker, Bezos, all of them became populist nationalists. They go, we're in. And they got down with their checks to Mar-a-Lago, genuflected, right, and became supplicants to Trump. And this is why I say these guys are dangerous. They're all progressive Democrats. They were made what they are by the Obama administration. They're all progressive Democrats. They are totally phony. All they want to do is go to where the source of money is so they can keep their being oligarchs. Because right now, if you look at them and look at who the theoreticians they look for, but they're not really on the spectrum of like MSNBC's here and, war rooms here, and some guys are more open borders and globalists, others are hardcore populist nationalists. They're on a whole other spectrum, and that spectrum is what I call techno-feudalism. They've been taken out of the world of capitalism. It's no longer markets and profits since we haven't allowed any competition and allowed these to become these massive companies. They are really digital platforms in rent. They're rent seekers, okay? And their idea is very feudalistic. It's like Venice in the 15th century. It is that the railhead is like the liege lord with the digital platform, and everybody else is a peasant, or what I call a digital serf. And this is how you're going to run it. And they have this network. They call it the network state. There's books out about it now. It's talk about it. And this is what these guys believe. And it's quite dangerous. And this is why I think you're seeing the impersonal nature of what's happening at DOGE, which I support going after the administrative state.
Well, that's always been a theme of yours. You want the deconstruction of the administrative state,
yes,
of the bureaucracy.
Yes.
What is Elon doing, and what is the DOGE team doing that you wouldn't do or would do differently?
Let's talk about three things on Elon. Number one, and where I'm his biggest supporter and have given him more credit than anybody. Number one, he was the first of the oligarchs, because I think of his engineering brain, to really look at where we were.
Wait, Steve Bannon now says he is Elon's biggest supporter, way before anybody?
Politically. And he worked through the math to say, hey, look, this Trump thing is actually this populist nationalist movement, which is what I call MAGA plus low information voters, plus part of the Make America Healthy Again. These housewives who were red-pilled during the pandemic, particularly about what their children were being taught in school.
That's right.
And the health thing with the mask. Kind of the Nicole Shanahan crowd, right?
That's right. The Malibu moms.
Now, around Trump, you have to understand, there's always a countervailing tension with Trump, with people who want Trump to be more Trump, right? Versus those say, you got to come down, you be nice, and look for the mythic traditional suburban mom that if you say nicer things, she'll vote for you. I keep saying that's never going to happen. Elon came in at a time in the campaign in the spring and summer of 2024 when that was actually being talked about. He sat down with Charlie Kirk's guys and worked through the math of a ground game we supported to do this MAGA plus.
Hey, what the hell?
The brother wrote $250 million in checks, $250 million, $50 million a month over 5 months. And I tell people, if you don't know about American politics today, when you see huge donors like the Adelsons or the Mercers, and people are talking about putting in $100 million, $150 million, that's over a cycle, a presidential cycle. This brother wrote $250 in the last 5 months, $50 a month to back a ground game, not to put it up on fancy commercials, which most of the billionaires get picked off with. Number one, he backed our play. Would President Trump have won without that? Yes.
Right.
But we wouldn't have known that answer at 10 or 11 o'clock on the Tuesday the 5th. That would have probably taken a couple of days to work through. And I'm not so sure we'd have had 53 guys in the U.S. Senate, probably 51. It'd have been much tighter, okay? And it was tight enough already. So he definitely had a huge aspect. Number two, he immediately got, like nobody else has got, the deconstruction of the administrative state. He understands that we have a fourth branch of government that's not in the Constitution. That's kind of a permanent government. And they don't care if Trump's passing through or AOC or Bernie Sanders are passing through. They run the deal like they're going to run. And here's what it is. When you take over the government, when you win, you get 4,000 people. You get 3,000 that can hit the dick place running immediately. Okay? All you need there is basically a security clearance, right? A pass on drugs, right? And a security clearance. And you can go and you can staff at these mid-level and junior levels immediately. You get 1,000 that have to be Senate confirmed. Those are your senior people. But you have 4,000. In the government, you have about 2.5 or 3 million civilians. You have about 2.5 million to 3 million military. So let's say 5 to 6 million there. Plus you have contractors. Another at executive level, another 5 million. So it makes sense. You have about 10 million people that run this apparatus that cost $6.5 to $7 trillion a year to run, right? Or it transfers money, but it costs a huge amount of money.
Okay, Kip says, for the record, Porty, I don't think that Tim Dillon would ever call himself a conservative comedian. Okay, I am not limited by what people call themselves, right? What people call themselves doesn't necessarily matter that much to me. What people call themselves isn't necessarily the most accurate. So whether or not Tim Dillon calls himself a conservative and a comedian, all right, I think it's a useful way of getting a handle on him if you previously knew nothing about Tim Dillon. But here, Steve Bannon is just saying nice thing after nice thing about Elon Musk.
To run. Plus it oversees, I don't know, 60 or 70 trillion dollars of assets, right? All the land, all the oil, everything that we control. That apparatus is so out of control that in order to get down to a sustainable model where we're going to actually get close to a balanced budget, it's got to be deconstructed. You have to take that apart, right? It's got to be made smaller. And you got to make some tough decisions. Right. Because programmatically, they do a lot of things. And quite frankly, with the economic distress we have and the corporations bailing on paying decent wages because they've invited the world in here to compete with American labor in American labor's home, that you have more working class people on Medicaid. You have more people on economic, security like food stamps. So,
okay, on the Mark Halperin's morning meeting, they talked about why does Brett Baier get all these interviews?
Leverage and power. He's using it.
Yeah. All right. Just real quick, Sean, why did Brett Baier got all three exclusives? He got the French, British, and today he's getting the Ukraine exclusive. Why are these world leaders giving Brett and Fox every interview?
And just for the record, fill in the blank, major leader visiting the United States going forward. I think one, it clearly was shown as the template, right? And so every world leader's team, foreign secretary, staff, foreign minister is looking at what happened initially and said, hey, let's do that ourselves because it's Fox News. It's at 6 o'clock. Good time to watch. They know the president's going to watch it. And that not only that, but when you're in the 6 o'clock hour, those clips will play in Hannity and Laura Ingraham and Jesse Waters' show when Dan's not on. And so it's a smart strategic move to basically have a second meeting with President Trump.
Yep. And I'll tell you one other reason. I agree with everything you said. Dick Cheney used to refuse to do any Sunday show but Russert and Meet the Press. And the reason was he told the staff, I'm not getting up early on my day off to do these other shows where the questions will not be good. If I'm going to do it, I want good questions. And Brett has good questions, and they respect that. They're not wasting their time with some crap.
And not that, again, I don't necessarily agree with this narrative, but when you're doing it with Brett, you get somebody who's going to ask tough, fair questions that Hannity is not a self-described news guy. Same with Laura and Jesse. And so that you get credit with staying within the news.
Okay. In basketball, the Lakers now look like they have a real chance to win the NBA championship. So how did a podcaster solve the problem Nikola Jokic? Okay, Jokic. So Nikola Jokic is the best player in the NBA. He's a center for the Denver team that won the last NBA championship. He's from Serbia. So the Balkans produce so many fantastic basketball players, including Luka Doncic.
On Jokic last year, and I don't know the exact number, but in the finals, in the finals versus Miami, he shot like 70% from the free throw line in.
J.J. Redick might have just devised the best defensive game plan ever created against Nikola Jokic. In the 2023 Western Conference Finals, the Lakers found some success by sticking a forward on Jokic and allowing Anthony Davis to roam off behind him and help. But that only did so much against the Denver machine that swept them en route to a title. So Redick borrowed that with Rui Hachimura starting on Joker and Jackson Hayes roaming off Aaron Gordon. And to start this game, this looked like the same movie we've seen before with nothing really new. Even a minute later, no one wants to get sealed on the fast break by Joker, so Rui's fighting to deny the entry pass, and this all looks fairly ordinary. But the next possession caught my eye. There was an off-ball foul that we couldn't really see live, but Hachimura is driving Jokic outside the free throw line and trying to impede his movement. And so, what do you do when someone shoots 74% inside 15 feet and is a near-perfect passer in those spots?
Right, so Jokic is formidable inside the free throw line, but they change the situation. They keep him out of that situation. He's no longer so formidable.
You don't let him catch the ball.
And they want Westbrook taking shots. Right, Westbrook shot the ball 17 times last Saturday night. That's what you want.
All inside 15 feet. Rui pushes out his catch. They actually switch, but only to front and deny, knowing a roamer's on the backside. The second Gordon gets it, LeBron switches to play the pass. Then good old Luka Doncic uses his length, and that's a great defensive possession. Hachimura picks up Jokic at midcourt chest to chest, trying to make his movement difficult and keep Joker away from the basket, and that takes him away from his scoring spots. Now,
Right, all sorts of people are absolutely formidable when they're in their safe space, when they're in a particular area where they're great, but you change the situation, they're not nearly as formidable.
Element here is the Lakers would switch.
Right, Donald Trump, he used to talk to reporters off the cuff, standing up outside. Now he's primarily talking to reporters when he's sitting at the Resolute desk. Right, it just looks much more impressive in the current arrangement. So Trump, as revealed in this new Michael Wolff book, has a guy who's just fantastic at creating situations and framing that presents Trump in the best light.
Jokic screens. But note the technique. LeBron jams to front him because Hayes is roaming on the backside, ignoring Aaron Gordon, and LA rotates nicely, but with LeBron lingering, the Nuggets need better spacing here to free up Murray or Michael Porter Jr., and this is Joker's first normal post-up, and they get a solid shot out of it. So part 1 of the game plan is keep Joker away from the hoop. Part 2 is to front and deny the pass when he's below the foul line, and part 3 is to dare people to shoot. They get it to him on the elbow this time. Hayes and Luka are just clogging the paint here, entirely conceding the 3 to Gordon, who actually went 4 for 7 on these. Although this doesn't quite work the same with Hayes on Jokic instead, because Rui isn't long enough off ball or a natural shot blocker. But when
So the Lakers are not big, right? They're going to be smaller than most teams. They have to scheme up a way to win games.
Hayes roaming off Gordon, he can clog up the paint for cutters in exchange for open threes, and that's a great rebound from a 40-year-old. It got really interesting when LA went small without Hayes. Jokic gets nice position again, Reeves doubles on the baseline, everyone pulls in to protect the paint, and again, Gordon is dared to shoot, and this is the exact setup Redick and LeBron discussed on their podcast last year when having a conversation about defending Jokic.
Yep. You knew getting that guy over there. Yep.
Right, and so this podcaster, JJ Redick, he's now the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers.
Would make you have to make the tough decision. Yep. Do I help on his spin? Do I let him score?
Right, it's like having a reality star who becomes president of the United States.
Yep. Do I stay home on Aaron Gordon?
Only the Nuggets have their personnel backwards this time. They want Porter in the corner shooting, so Gordon can roam the baseline as a lob threat. When the Lakers are small, they have very little rim protection, so they have to keep teams out of the paint. Jokic gets deep and they get a good shot, and so LA used its speed and agility here. Dorian Finney-Smith switches onto Jokic, then beats him to the spot to deny the pass. LeBron's on the backside, and James actually doubles Joker off ball.
So I remember in high school when my Placer High School team was entering the playoffs, right, our first opponent just had an absolutely formidable center. And so they were doing all this training in practice. I would attend practice about how to deny him the ball. Because once he gets the ball close to the basket, right, you're in deep, deep trouble.
Gordon wisely sets a screen, and when Rui can't fight over, it's a great look for Denver. The Lakers doubled Jokic like this off the ball a ton. Rui and LeBron sandwich him here, and they leave Christian
Look at that. They're just, right? They're just denying him the ball.
Brown on full dare mode. They did the same thing to Russell Westbrook at times during the game, baiting him into 17 field goal attempts on a night where Joker took just 7. And on this possession, they sent the entire team at him. First with Hachimura limiting his movement, then Reeves blocking his path. Then they basically triple team him off ball by sagging off Westbrook. They keep 3 guys on him with a wall. And by then the Nuggets are stuck. And that might be the craziest defensive possession I've seen since the 1957 National Championship game when North Carolina swarmed Wilt Chamberlain like this so he couldn't catch it, daring his teammates to hit outside shots. Speaking of crazy, Jared Vanderbilt took the game plan as a personal challenge, jumping Julian Strawther for a steal right after he entered the game in the first. Then, 30 seconds later, he played bumper cars with Jokic in the backcourt. You can see Joker's frustration, and then he's called for the offensive foul with that little elbow. And on the next possession, Joker's already had enough, and when they get down the floor, Westbrook tries to sneak it over the top, but Vando forces his third turnover in about a minute, and while we're on this, he then drew a flagrant foul on the rebound at the other end, which just set up another full-court dance with Jokic, where he harassed him until finally going full Rodman with the impede lead, then fall down maneuver.
This is
And
great.
I haven't seen this level of full court harassment since the 98 finals when Dennis entangled himself with Karl Malone, judo style. The Lakers basically won this game by forcing 20 Nugget turnovers, 6 from Jokic himself.
Oh, so glorious, so glorious. All right, Ezra Klein talking here with Martin Gurry about the revolt of the elites.
You were pretty critical of Joe Biden. Is that the form of the elite that he led, the Democratic Party in that era, became defined around what you call politics of control? What's the politics of control?
Well, first of all, I want to apologize to Joe Biden. If I had known, I mean, you could sort of see that the guy wasn't there, all right? But if I had known the degree to which he really was not in charge of anything.
I've read you on this. I think you're wrong on this.
I know. I mean, that's pretty clear to me. Whoever was running the White House during that time, I think, had that, that impulse to go back to the 20th century. And, the ideal internet for people like that would be the New York Times circa, 1958 or something, front page of the New York Times, 1958. That's the way information should be. And they have converted this into some sort of, this is a pretty recent development, an almost ideological construct where they now seem to be promoting what you might call a guided society, where the ordinary people like me and others, need Sherpas to make sure we don't fall off the cliffs and keep going upwards and onwards, so we're protected against disinformation, and we're protected against hate, and we're protected against all these other things.
Okay, Kip has a good question. Should unelected judges be able to subvert the will of the people? We elected Donald Trump to fix America. What's the point of voting if deep state appointees can derail our efforts to doge us back to reality? Well, particularly should district court judges like this judge in San Francisco be able to issue injunctions for the entire country, right? District court judges, that's a new development over the past 50 years. So the United States system is set up to make it hard for things to get done politically. So I don't want to change the system. All right, I want judges to have power along with the executive branch and the legislative branch. We just need to get better judges. I think Trump will win a great deal of these court fights over his executive orders.
Attempt to erect a censorship apparatus that would, de-emphasize people or silence people, silence certain voices, silence certain opinions, get experts and bureaucrats to basically proclaim that certain truths were false. And it was a futile attempt. I mean, it was completely futile as it was happening. And of course, it paved the way to Trump. I come from Cuba, where censorship.
I didn't know you came from Cuba.
Oh, yes. I was, by the time I was 10, I had experienced a pretty stern right-wing censorship and a left-wing dictatorship that basically killed the media. I mean, there was no media left. So I was pretty touchy about that sort of thing. And I have antenna that can feel.
Good comment on X. How are we getting all these reports, these videos, and these photographs of that Oval Office exchange when the AP wasn't even able to be there? Yeah, I feel so sorely deprived that the AP wasn't there. Oh, Edward Dutton's reaction to the video of the shouting match between Zelensky and Trump. Genuine question, is this a deep fake? No. Okay. So Pradeep Shankar, MD, says no American ally will trust the president after that. Right, not so sure that is correct. But there's no reason to trust Trump. MAGA won't accept this, but that's the reality. Right? You don't have to trust. Don't have to trust Trump. You have to trust common interests. Right? When America has common interests, then we will reach deals. Zelensky is not an ally of the United States, says Scott McConnell of American Conservative Magazine. We have no treaties with him. In my view, he is an enemy in that he has and will do everything he can to get the U.S. into a war versus Russia. Oof, that's tough. According to Atlas poll, 80% of Americans believe that Russia is the main culprit for the war. Emmanuel Macron is standing by Zelensky. After the White House banned the AP from major presidential events, the press pool has become friendlier to the president. So there's one guy, Brian Glenn, White House correspondent for Real America's Voice. Is that Steve Bannon? No, that's a different outlet. So Glenn has become a darling in the conservative right for his friendliness to the president and for his personal life. He's dating Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. And a lot of the questions for Trump, right, come from Brian Glenn. So Brian Glenn is the one who asked Zelensky about how he dresses. Okay, so this is fun. This is good. All right, let's go to the videotape, as Warner Wolff would say. Love Warner Wolff, man.
Second question for President Zelensky. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have problems with you not respecting.
I don't have such.
Office.
I will wear a costume after this war will finish.
Okay.
Yes, maybe one.
Maybe something
like
yours.
Yes. Maybe something better. I don't know. We will see. Maybe something cheaper than. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Second question. My second question for President Zelensky. Why don't you wear a suit? Why don't you wear a suit? You're at the highest level in this country's office, and you refuse to wear a suit. Just want to see if do you own a suit?
Yeah, problems.
A lot of Americans have.
I kind of like the new White House press poll. Right, it's working for me. Right, to me, it seems like a good thing.
Feel things coming, and thank God for the First Amendment. They can't do it here.
Well, let me pick up on something there, because this feels to me like it is completely fundamental right now to the right's self-definition. J.D. Vance goes to the Munich conference, tells the Europeans they're doing too much to restrict speech and expression, political expression in their countries. And then I look at what people do. I look at, say, Elon Musk has made cis or cisgender. He has tagged that as hate speech on X. I'm watching the Trump administration.
Okay, so that's humorous, right? It's just one social media platform, and so Elon. It's just an incontrovertible truth that Elon Musk has opened up X. There is more free speech in America and more free speech on X than before Elon took it over.
Tell all the agencies they have to go through and look for words that are now out of favor. Diversity and DEI.
Yeah, so this new administration doesn't want to promote DEI. That's not primarily censorship. It's not interfering with the rights of Americans. They can promote DEI all they want. The President of the United States no longer wants the federal government boosting any DEI. I don't see that as a significant censorship threat.
DEI and things like that. And it also be erased. They've ended up knocking out things they didn't mean to knock out because the word just happened to be there in another context. So I kind of see this world of people who I think understand themselves as free expression warriors. And then as soon as
they are overwhelmingly free expression warriors, that doesn't mean they want the United States government to promote DEI.
As they get into power, whether it's running X or running the government, they certainly seem to me to be on a campaign of censorship. What do you think I'm missing?
I mean, you're missing dimension, I think. The dimension of censorship under Biden. He basically told the platforms, you have to adhere to European standards of good behavior online. Well, the Europeans don't have a First Amendment, right? And the Europeans, honestly, we tend to think of them as being just like us. When it comes to speech, and this has always been the case, and it is more the case every day, there's like halfway between us and China, all right?
Oh, that's glorious to describe the European attitude towards speech as halfway between us and China. It also seems pretty true. So this is also glorious, right? The White House is having press staffers eat Zelensky's lunch after he was kicked out of the Oval Office. Zelensky, we're told, was begging to stay. The lunch that they were supposed to have is sitting right outside the hallway, and press staffers are going to be eating that lunch.
Went up to the press area to get an understanding of what we're watching. This is what I was told. The president has kicked Zelensky out of the White House. His delegation right now is telling him that he's got to go home. The president felt disrespected. Officials in the room felt that beyond the language barrier that we've heard some discussion about, Zelensky's body language, shrugging and eye-rolling, was ungrateful, disrespectful, and the president feels that Zelensky is not ready for peace, and he can come back when he's ready to talk about peace, but he's not in that position right now, and Zelensky is being told he's got to go. The lunch that they were supposed to have is sitting right outside the hallway, and the press staffers are going to be eating that lunch. This is really pretty incredible. We see the
Jackie,
SUV,
hang on with us one
Zelensky's
moment.
SUV.
If you look to your left, you're going to see him. Let's watch.
Mr. President, is the deal off? President Zelensky, can you tell us what happened?
Did you sign the minerals deal? Why were you so disrespectful to the president?
We may be watching the floor fall through this moment in international relations and diplomacy, or this might be the art of the deal, and we're not going to know for some time. Jackie, it appears that even going into this meeting that this relationship was not great. About a week ago, President Trump called Zelensky a dictator.
Okay, this is glorious. All right, let's have a look on Mark Halperin's timeline. So Steve Scalise is the first member of GOP leadership to weigh in. President Trump is fighting for peace around the world. He's putting America first. He's the only one to get Russia to the table to consider a serious and lasting peace agreement with Ukraine. So background on what just went down per White House official. After the contentious Oval Office meeting that played out in front of reporters, Zelensky and the Ukrainians went into a separate room, standard, while Trump huddled with his advisors. At that point, Trump decided he didn't feel Zelensky was ready to negotiate and that the conversations would not be productive. Trump posted his statement on Truth Social, and then Rubio and Wolff informed Zelensky he was being asked to leave, and the negotiations were over. were over for the day. The White House official added, "This was not planned in advance or part of a broader strategy. It's simply how the day played out." And Mark Halperin says the various reactions to what just happened tells you everything you need to know about everyone. Trump told The Spectator he had dinner with Jeff Bezos on Wednesday night, the same day that Bezos announced that the Washington Post opinion section would embrace personal liberties and free markets. Okay, that was an interview with Meghan McCain's husband, Ben Dominic. Okay. Oh, no, Lindsey, I don't want to see Lindsey Graham or hear from Lindsey Graham, so I won't play that. Let's go back to Martin Guri here, talking with Ezra Klein.
So I think the difference is that, okay, do you, as an ordinary person, feel like you can say whatever you want? All right. If you don't like X, you can go to, Blue Sky or something, right? But
that's true then too. You could go to Rumble, you could go to Gab, you could go to Truth Social. The thing I want to push you on a little bit here, because I'm not saying there was no. I think your point, as I take it, is interesting. That partially what you're seeing people like the Biden administration respond to is an effort to try to get control of an information space that they no longer know how to control and even no longer know how to operate in. But I am struck by seeing very, very aggressive movements from the Trump administration immediately to impose control on what, say, civil servants can say. So is that a dynamic of the left that you're describing, or is it just now in this era of information overload, actually both sides are fighting for control of it and whatever their professed values as soon as they get into power, the thing they really want to do is like decide what the boundaries are and what you can say and, how you can say it. And
well, let's give it time. I mean, you may be right. All I have to say is I find it remarkable. You can look at me. I am not a young man. All right. That free speech is a right-wing cause. All right. When did that happen? Okay. I mean, you have all of them left people, John Kerry most recently, bemoaning the existence of the First Amendment. I have never seen that in my entire life. Everybody always pretended at least that they were for free speech. Even when secretly they wanted to control it, even when secretly they were trying to control it, they always talk the talk. And now, only on the left, you find people saying, no, we need boundaries, we need this, we need that, we protection against. So that's my take on that. You may be right. Maybe that this crowd ends up being even worse. So we got to watch that. I don't really, they're not, I am an independent politically and have no dogs in the political fight. But in the free speech fight, I'm all in. Okay?
Well, tell me about your movement on this. So 2016, you don't vote. 2020, you don't vote. 2024, you vote for Donald Trump. What moved you towards him in that period?
In large part, it was that. It was free speech. It was normalizing the censorship of things that in the olden days, me as a 60s guy, okay, very, very aging hippie, okay, felt like this is crazy. This is crazy. This is what we fought for in the 60s, was to be able to say whatever we wanted to, and to expand that to whatever the limit is that doesn't break down social peace. So that was my number one thing. Now, number two thing was I just felt like the world was becoming more and more dangerous. And I knew, regardless of what you say, that this was an empty skin suit in the White House, and that we were just like an airplane on automatic pilot circling and circling, waiting to run out of gas. And I do not love Donald Trump. I never have. But I felt like he was for free speech, and he's a live brain in the White House. Hopefully he will be more than that. But
you also say something else that I have found a lot of people felt this time. I think it is underestimated how much the meaning of Donald Trump changed.
Yes.
From 2016 to 2020
Yes.
to 2024.
Yes.
And you write that Trump this time had become a kind of mythical figure, that he has been, quote, transformed into a living symbol of the progressive elite's abuse of power and contempt for the principle of equality. I've heard something like that from a lot of people, and particularly the mythic dimension of Trump.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean by that and how you felt that change in your own perspective.
Well, I mean, I can tell you the moment it happened, where I suddenly went, geez, okay. It was that near assassination episode where
Okay, Kip says Jennifer Rubin just landed a gig at the Winston-Salem Journal. Do her fellow Jews find her revolting, or is it just me? It entirely depends on your hero system. So, same with non-Jews. Jews, non-Jews who share Jennifer Rubin's hero system like what she says, and Jews and non-Jews who don't share her hero system don't like what she has to say. So Jews, like non-Jews, tend not to be obsessed with politics. Only a relatively tiny number of Jews and non-Jews, right, pay a great deal of attention to politics. Kip says, you do realize this situation signifies the shite hitting the fan between America and Europe. Everything changes going forward. The shattering will affect everything. Luke, yes, it will or it won't. Right, this might just be a minor bump in the road. Remember, it dominated the news for days that Trump called Zelensky a dictator, and then Trump yesterday essentially took it back and said, oh, did I say that? All right, fantastic article here in the New York Times. How Elon Musk executed his takeover of the federal bureaucracy. The operation was driven with a frenetic focus by the billionaire, who channeled his resentment of regulatory oversight into a drastic overhaul of government agencies. So it was on the last Friday of September 2023, Elon went to a dinner party at the Silicon Valley mansion of the technology investor Chamath Palihapitiya, who's on the All In podcast. The visit was meant to be discreet, and here he was at this dinner in honor of Vivek Ramaswamy. And as the night wore on, Musk held forth on the patio on a variety of topics, and he made clear that he saw the gutting of federal bureaucracy as primarily a technology challenge. He talked about how he'd overhauled Twitter and laid off 80% of the employees. Wouldn't it be great, Musk said, if he could have access to the computers of the federal government? Just give him the passwords, he said, and he would make the government fit and trim. So what started out as just musings at a dinner party has evolved into a radical takeover of the federal bureaucracy. It is driven with a frenetic focus by Elon Musk, who is channeling his libertarian impulses and his resentment of regulatory oversight of his vast business holdings into a singular position of influence. The richest man in the world has embedded his engineers and his aides inside the government's critical digital infrastructure. Right, DOGE has inserted itself into more than 20 agencies. His team has grabbed control of the government's Human Resources Agency, the Office of Personnel Management, commandeering email systems to pressure civil servants to quit so he can call the workforce. It's burrowed into computer systems across the government, tracing how much money was flowing so the administration could choke it off. The DOGE team have sought access to at least 7 sensitive government databases, including the internal systems of the Social Security Administration and the IRS. Elon Musk has transformed DOGE from a casual notion into a powerful weapon, something only possible in the Trump era. It means wild experimentation and an embrace of severe cost-cutting that Musk previously used to upend Twitter. It means an appetite for political risk and an appetite for impulsive decision-making that he shares with President Trump. Musk's stealth approach has stunned Democrats and civil servants. They were caught defenseless. They failed to imagine an incursion from inside the bureaucracy. And seasoned conservative operatives like Stephen Miller and Russell Vought. Stephen Miller and Russell Vought are just two of my favorite people. Right? I love these guys, and it makes me really happy that they are stepping up here. So Musk and his advisors, including Steve Davis, a cost cutter has worked with him at many companies, did not want to create a commission as past budget hawks had done. Good. Right? So Musk saw an opening. There's a little-known unit with reach across the government, the U.S. Digital Service, that President Barack Obama created in 2014 after the botched rollout of healthcare.gov. And so Musk's team realized they could use this digital office, whose staff had been focused on helping agencies fix technology problems, to quickly penetrate the federal government and then decipher how to break it apart. Right? They called it U.S. DOGE Service. They did not even have to change the initials. And they began their move when President Joe Biden was still in office. Right? Musk identified the office as a key part of his strategy late last year, when the Trump transition team gained a key ally on the inside. This is a veteran civil servant named Amy Gleason. She joined staff of this particular agency as a senior advisor at the end of the Biden administration. She was described to other employees as someone who would aid the Trump transition. And then she recommended that the unit bring on board several young engineers who would become part of Elon Musk's team. Allies of Musk, meanwhile, fanned out across the government as part of the transition. So while Joe Biden was still in office, extracting intelligence about computer systems, contracts, and personnel. So Musk's team is working faster than the legal efforts to stop it. They're making drastic changes that are going to be hard to unwind. They are pushing out workers, ignoring civil service protections, tearing up contracts, shuttering an entire agency established by Congress, the U.S. Agency for International Development. Musk and his crew of more than 40 now have about all the passwords they could ever need. His swift success has been fueled by the president, who handed him the hazy assignment of remaking the federal government shortly after the billionaire endorsed him last summer. At the time, Trump was simply flattered that Elon Musk wanted to work with him, and so Trump gave him broad leeway to design a strategy and to execute it. Trump was not particularly interested in the details. Oh, man, this is just a fantastic New York Times report. It's just incredibly funny. Right. A lot of reasons for joy here. If you support DOGE, and a lot of reasons for despair if you're opposed to DOGE. Right, back to the New York Times. There are 3 pro-Trump dinners organized by Elon Musk and the billionaire investor Nelson Peltz over the course of 2024. Musk would talk about the need for a smaller government, but he struggled to offer specific ideas. So at the time, he was infuriated by Joe Biden and what he saw as deliberate efforts by Joe Biden's administration to harm his businesses Tesla and SpaceX. By the time Trump took the stage at an outdoor rally in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13, Musk saw him as his only hope, and immediately after a bullet grazed Trump's ear, coming within an inch of killing Trump, Musk endorsed him in a post on X. In the months that followed, Elon Musk would plow about $300 million in efforts to elect Donald Trump. Then his first public mention of what would become DOGE came less than 3 weeks later. It was during an August 2nd podcast with Lex Friedman. 11 days later, Musk hosted Trump for a live audio discussion on X, once again raised his idea of a government efficiency commission. I love it, said Trump. So Trump has become fixated on the national debt, unlike the first term. So August 19, Musk responded to an account on X suggesting that he named the proposed organization Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, reference to Dogecoin, a meme cryptocurrency that the billionaire had joked about for years. Then September 5, Trump said he would create a government efficiency commission led by Elon Musk, and Trump offered few details but said it would save trillions of dollars. Then Howard Lutnick, who became Trump's commerce secretary, visited Musk in Texas in October to discuss the project, and they decided that it would cut $2 trillion and eliminate the federal deficit. But Musk's concept of DOGE was still quite unformed. Then after Trump's win, right, Musk was absolutely elated, but he'd done virtually no preparation for his new initiative. But he spent most of the next 2 months after Trump's victory staying at a $2,000 a night cottage at Mar-a-Lago. And so a tight circle began planning how to swiftly upend federal bureaucracy, starting from scratch. The group included Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Howard Lutnick, and healthcare entrepreneur Brad Smith. So they brainstormed for ways to terminate federal workers. They thought, how can we motivate them to quit? They said, we must make them return to the office 5 days a week. They talked about likelihood of litigation. They liked their chances with the Supreme Court. Trump announced the Department of Government Efficiency on November 12 as an entity outside of government, but Musk saw problems with that because it would be subject to public record rules. He wanted access to federal data and payment systems. If he couldn't get that, the whole endeavor would be a waste of his time. So they decided they'd make Musk a senior advisor to the president. Right? They settled on a plan, but they kept it secret for weeks, blindsiding many people working with Donald Trump. So their operation would take over the U.S. digital service. And an advantage of this structure was secrecy. For all his talk about transparency, Elon Musk was obsessed with confidentiality and fearful of leaks. So he drew a lot of guidance from Stephen Miller and his wife, Katie. And from Russ Vought, who's now the manager of the Office of Management and Budget. Russ Vought was seen as radioactive by some in Trump's inner circle because of his association with Project 2025. But Musk and Vought have hit it off. They're on the same wavelength. They both agreed taking the most extreme action possible is the way to go. Vivek Ramaswamy focused on deregulation. But Musk was not interested in constitutional law. He wanted his team to be radical. He wanted to shut down entire agencies such as the Department of Education. He wanted to shut down the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau by choking off its funds. On November 14, DOGE put out a recruiting call on X, looking for super high IQ revolutionaries willing to work 80-plus hours a week on unglamorous cost-cutting. So by late November, Musk's allies were working out of the Trump Transition Office in West Palm Beach, and they were interviewing candidates for government jobs, trying to find the smartest people possible. And they brought in Musk executive Davis, who Musk describes as Steve Davis. Steve is like chemo. A little chemo can save your life. A lot of chemo could kill you. So he says, Steve Davis is excellent at tearing things apart. He's not necessarily the right person to build an organization back up. And then one of those who heeded the call was Luke Farrator, a 23-year-old former SpaceX intern from Nebraska. He was an ideal Musk candidate. He was libertarian and precocious coder, dropped out of college to receive a grant from Peter Thiel. And he submitted an application not to the Trump transition December 17, but to the Biden administration to work at the digital office. The application included only one sentence: super passionate about serving my country in the USDS, he wrote. His outreach confused staff members. It's not clear why someone would be applying with just weeks left of the Biden administration, but Ms. Gleason pushed him forward, but he wasn't hired. None of the candidates she referred to the USDS were hired immediately, but after Trump's inauguration, they were swiftly brought aboard as members of the rebranded U.S. DOGE service. And Gleason would become the acting administrator of the Department of Government Efficiency. Allies of Musk began arriving at tech hubs in the federal government before Inauguration Day. They describe themselves as part of the transition team. And then the blitz began once Trump took office. And they shocked civil servants with the speed with which they seized the digital pipelines, the federal bureaucracy. This is our one and only chance to restore democracy from the dictatorship of the bureaucracy. The article concludes, quoting Elon Musk there from a post on X. Great long article.
I don't know how lucky you've been, but if you've been lucky, you have never been in a place where bullets are flying. I come from Cuba. I can tell you, when bullets start flying, you think you're a hero until that moment, and then you hit the ground and you make like a pancake, okay? And here's a man who not only was being shot at, but had been hit. And he probably had no idea how badly, all right? And stood up and told the Secret Service agents, I mean, just presence of mind. You people have knocked my shoes off. I'm going to put on my shoes. I'm going to turn to the crowd. I'm going to say fight, okay? And that, number one, that took a lot of courage, just basically physical courage. Number two, presence of mind, all right? But there's a third element, and I don't even know what to do with that one. I mean, you can call it the providential interpretation of Trump. You know, he thinks that God saved him to make America great again. Or you can give a mathematical explanation. He's kind of like a strange attractor, you know? And these incredible coincidences keep happening all around him that completely defy the laws of probability. The fact that the bullet missed him, that image where he's standing there shaking his fist at destiny, and he's got those Secret Service agents wrapped protectively around, and there's a flag in the background. What are the odds of that thing happening spontaneously? No wonder people think it was acted, right? But if you look at the last 80 years, there's one series of bizarre questions. How did he beat Hillary Clinton? How did his popularity resurrect from January 6, 2021? How did he just kind of dispose of a pretty good field of Republican aspirants, including proven winners like DeSantis, you know? I mean, endless numbers of questions. Every event tends to skew in his direction. You know, you can say that what he did, being exiled and coming back, was kind of a hero's journey. You know, that's not necessarily a moral quality, and he could do many bad things with all those qualities. But that's part of what I think the mythic side of Trump is the fact that the world around him is not the world around the rest of us.
I think there are seasons to the way we understand the world. And I think certainly in the Obama era, we were in a season of empirics, technocracy. Yeah. And I don't just mean that in terms of literally the reports people produced and the way they argued. I also mean it in terms of the aesthetic.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And this is a point my colleague Ross Douthat has made, but it's also something that I've been thinking about, that it has felt to me for some time like we're re-entering a slightly more mythic turn of the wheel. I think you see it in the popularity of Catholicism, right, with its pomp and its circumstance and its strangeness of Greek Orthodoxy. Yes. You know, the return of astrology as a major force. And something about Trump ended up fitting that, for a lot of people at least, right? I'm not saying that I have this particular interpretation of him, but the degree to which, you know, I think even within his own movement, he is treated as, I've said this many times before, that he's almost like the...
Okay, there was another great moment on this morning's Mark Halperin show, right, from the independent doctor, Bobby Kennedy.
If you just had more competence. And I will say for Dan, be careful what you wish for with DOGE, because wait until one of the other former Democratic business leaders like Bill Ackman or Chamath or Marc Andreessen steps in for Elon as the next rotating head of DOGE. And now suddenly you take away that personality that people don't like, and it's just the policy. And all of a sudden that's going to be the most popular thing in the country. You get Bill Ackman and Mark Cuban to co-lead DOGE, and Trump gets to parade around Mark Cuban like a little puppet while he gets his little PBM reform. You know, like, just watch out because if Elon's not there, it's going to be...
John, if I knew how to put up the little fire emoji, I would.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, this is great. Like, bring in some other billionaires when Elon gets tired, right? Bill Ackman, Marc Andreessen. I don't know if Mark Cuban could possibly be harnessed to do some good, but that's a highly intriguing idea.
Grand Ayatollah of national conservatism, that but people, even the people who like him, don't view him as this precise technical policy thinker. They view him as somebody with a kind of intuitive, almost spiritual connection to the country that they see him leading, the people they see him representing. And then the revolving around him of all these other powerful figures like Musk and so on, it made him more like this. It wasn't just his show anymore. He became like this, you know, quasi demigod-like or pope-like figure presiding over a moment.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. That's actually a pretty deep observation. And having lived through the 60s, which is kind of like that, astrology brought it to mind. But there was that sense of mysticism almost, of, connection to something beyond just everyday life. There must be something more to it than this. I think there's a huge hunger for that right now. I think a lot of our politics sublimate that, honestly. It's impossible to measure empirically. I don't know how you do that. But I profoundly believe that. I think we have been living through a period of, I think the Obama era was cool, calm, collected, the rule of technocracy. And that was very flavorless, I think, for a lot of people. The people wanted meat. And, I mean, what is Trump, right? I mean, he's literally red meat. So I think we're beginning this era. I think there's more down the road. So let's keep our eyes open because it can manifest itself in a number of good or bad ways.
Well, it's also cooperation versus dominance, I think. That the promise of the Obama era, of Obama himself in a way, was you could cooperate your way to this future, right? You could talk your way, think your way through the conflicts. And Trump, and I think something I see people responding to, but I've been in D.C. this week talking to people sort of from different factions of the right, and something they all say is that America is strong and we stopped throwing around that strength. That we have the ability to shape events in our image and to our desires and to our interests, and we bound ourselves in ways that we didn't have to, right? We have this huge economy, but we didn't use things like tariffs to make others bend to our will. We let ourselves get taken advantage of by China. We don't do any territorial expansion anymore, right? Things in the 19th century, early 20th century were more common in terms of American politics.
All right, so much fun stuff to read on X right now. Just saw a video from inside Ukraine, some guy saying once the war was over, they were going to track down all the military impressment gangs and kill them all. It's possible that many in Ukraine don't want an end to open hostility because they fear such. NBC reports the U.S. State Department is ending support for Ukraine's power grid restoration. Richard Hanania. I watched the entire press conference with Zelensky. There were 40 minutes of discussion up to the argument. Most people saw at most the last 10 minutes. The whole video gives the proper context. When I first watched the argument without the proper context, I thought it was possible that Trump and Vance ambushed Zelensky or even trying to humiliate him. That is not what happened. Yet 40 minutes of calm conversation. Vance made a point that did not attack Zelensky. It wasn't even addressed to him, and Zelensky clearly started the argument. In the first 40 minutes, Zelensky kept trying to go beyond what was negotiated in the deal. When Trump was asked a question, it was always, we'll see. Zelensky made blanket assertions that there would be no negotiating with Putin and that Russia would pay for the war. When Trump said that it was a tragedy that people on both sides were dying, Zelensky interjected that the Russians were the invaders. For his part, Trump made clear that the U.S. would continue delivering military aid. All Zelensky had to do was to remain calm for a few more minutes and they would have signed a deal. The argument started when Trump pointed out that it would be hard to make a deal if you talk about Putin the way that Zelensky does. Vance interjects to make the reasonable point that Biden called Putin names, and that didn't get us anywhere. The Zelensky-Trump dynamic was calm and stable. It was when Vance spoke that Zelensky started to interrogate him throughout the press conference. To that point, everyone was making their arguments directly to the audience. Zelensky decided to challenge J.D. Vance and ask him hostile questions. He went back to his point that Putin never sticks to ceasefires, once again implying that negotiations are pointless. Why on earth would you do this? Then came the fight that we all saw. Zelensky was minutes away from being home free, and he would have had the deal, and he would have had new commitments from the Trump administration. The point Vance made was directed against Biden and the media, taking them to task for speaking in moralistic terms. This offended Zelensky, and that began the argument. I've been a fan of Zelensky up to this point, but this showed so much incompetence, if not emotional instability, that I don't see how he recovers from this. The relationship with the administration is broken. Ukraine should probably go with new leadership at this point. Wow, I think I agree with Richard Hanania's analysis.
Policy become like morally uncommon, not just a thing we don't do, but a thing we don't even consider doing. And Trump is a bringing back of this old spirit, a kind of more domineering frontier-like, you use your strength to reshape the world energy.
Yeah. I think there's some truth in that. I would say that a lot of people that I know who are pro-Trump, and they tend to be ridiculously people that I read and not people that I know, feel that he's not their dominator. He's their liberator. In other words, he's the guy who's breaking up this very dominating system of elite institutional governance and allowing the normies, as they call themselves, to sort of do what they wish. All right. I think the word frontier that you used is critical. And I mean, this is a great country. I mean, I'm an immigrant, right? So I feel like the frontier spirit is part of my spirit. I think Americans basically that's who they are. They have this craving for some far frontier-like thing that they must, master or conquer or populate or coordinate. It doesn't really matter. The modality doesn't matter. It's the challenge that matters. And I think honestly under Obama, there was no real challenge. Where were we headed towards? It was unclear. And I think for the moment, and we'll see with Trump, for the moment, the clarity is in negation, in undoing that controlling apparatus that the Biden administration had set up.
I think if you are a normie liberal, let's call it, the way you're experiencing Donald Trump, Elon Musk, DOGE broadly, the sort of Russell vote, the sort of war on what now gets called the administrative state, is as this incredible assertion of powers, maybe even a constitutional crisis, right? They went in, they just, destroyed USAID in a day, right? That wasn't something that people thought you could do. They fired huge numbers of federal workers, saying it was for cause, even though it had nothing to do with their individual job performance, knocked out all these probationary workers, right? They've tried to break huge amounts of the federal government, reshape it to their will. The way that has been experienced by liberals is as an extraordinary assertion of control, of power that the executive is not supposed to have. The way you've described it, the way I've seen other people describe it, is as an act of...
Right. That's hilarious, right? Liberals played a huge role in constructing the power of the federal government. The idea that liberals are aghast at the president exercising this kind of power, right? That's absurd. What a delusion on the part of the left.
Breaking up control. I'd like you to...
They took this power for granted, and now they resent it that it's being used against them.
Try to describe how it looks from that perspective, thinking about an audience who's experiencing it in the opposite way.
Well, I mean, I was probably de-amplified by Facebook at some point. I don't even know why I said, but when my wife would send out my articles, they got a lot more response than when I sent out my articles on Facebook. And I think when Mark Zuckerberg saw the light, suddenly realized, I don't like censorship anymore, strangely after Donald Trump got elected. I think that is the way that the people on this side, and I'm not a Trumpist. Like I said, I believe in free speech. And I thought the idea that you were supposed to say certain words, I mean, the right has never had this power, okay? The power to impose certain words, the power to basically come up with entirely new definitions about things that were pretty settled, like who's a man and who's a woman, been settled since Adam and Eve. And all these constantly changing new permutations of ideas that were not intuitive, let's put it that way, but mandatory from the moment they get proclaimed, and by whom, I don't even know. I had a friend who was a professor, and this was like years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, and I asked him, what's it like? He says, it's like a mind-clearing operation being in college. You're a college professor. Sooner or later, something's going to blow up on you, So it's not just the elites being controlling. It's a kind of a culture of control or an ideology of control. There is, I think, an element of revolt to the public in it.
So I understand the culture you're reacting to here. I see where you're coming from on that.
Yep.
But I want to keep focused on the actual acts of the president here, because I'll note that, so I've asked you about the dismantling USAID, which you've written columns on, the actions of DOGE, which you've written pieces on, and you sort of moved to whether or not Facebook shadow banned you. I don't know if Facebook shadow banned you. If they did, they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
But the actions of the administration have been, your guy from Cuba, have been the assertion of an extraordinary amount of executive control over the administrative state. Things that I can tell you the Biden administration did not think they were allowed to do, right? The Obama administration did not think they were allowed to do. The amount of stories I have heard about how difficult it is to work through the privacy.
That's hilarious, right? The Supreme Court rejected Joe Biden's plans for amnesty on student loans, and yet the Biden administration kept doing it. Anyway, the idea that the Biden administration was just some small, timid operation. Remember when Obama and his IRS, they denied nonprofit status to conservative Tea Party operations? All right, what Ezra Klein is saying here just does not ring true.
Regulations of the IRS in order to make social insurance programs be smoother, and in the end they just weren't that smooth because everybody was so concerned about privacy and you just couldn't get access to the systems. They just come in and they bust their way to the systems. So again, when you see them doing this, and you see this not as the taking of control but the breaking of a controlling apparatus, try to describe that perspective on it for someone who doesn't share it? I mean, you must know enough liberals to know that they are experiencing this era of Trump and Musk and DOGE as like the dawning of authoritarianism. Like, how do you tell them to see it from the way you're seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, what is authoritarianism? That one, I do know that most of my friends are liberals. They don't think he's an authoritarian, though. What is he doing to the government? Okay, what I see is being done is the very earliest moment in which AI collides with the analog world. That IRS thing you were describing. I mean, I was a bureaucrat for many, many years at CIA, all right? So I know perfectly well how that works. First of all, there's all these controlling mandates. In the end, they'll checkmate each other, right? So you have this paralysis, and it's all take this sheet of paper, write the memo, take it here, take it there. In the end, it gets lost and nothing happens, right? What you have is Elon Musk applying AI to all those rules and regulations, and you can identify exactly where you can go, perfectly legal, right?
It's not clear that it's perfectly legal.
Well, it is not unclear to me. I mean, they're moving so fast that there's probably a lot I don't know. But for example, USAID was set up by executive order. So you can crash that down by executive order. There was no act of Congress.
No, it was set up by Congress.
That's not what I understand.
In 1998, its current structure was created through Congress. I mean, it is USAID is statute.
Well, all I can tell you is I see this as the application of the human AI mind to the analog world, and let's put the legality aside. It allows for the identification of things that can be cut way faster than the analog minds can follow. And I have to ask you, if you want to be an authoritarian, are you going to come back to government? I mean, let me tell you, I have lived under authoritarians. Cutting back the government is not what they do.
See, but I don't think that they're cutting back the government. I think they are trying to take control of it. I've heard this AI thing from a couple people, and I follow it closely, and I am open to the idea that one thing Elon Musk wants to do is bring AI into the federal government. I am not super open to the idea that that's what DOGE is doing now. For one thing, like with the word efficiency, it's always efficiency for what? AI for what, right? Every AI system has some kind of value function, some kind of prompt you have to be giving it. The question of the prompt is really then the important question. Like, yes, you could, in theory, unleash AI on the entire range of Treasury payment data. What are you trying to get it defined? If you're trying to get it defined fraud, fine. How is fraud defined? Like, what do you say is fraud? I don't even think really, to be honest with you, that's what you think they're doing. Like, you wrote a good piece, I think, just not from my perspective, about why you thought it was good that they were getting rid of USAID. Like, what was that argument?
My take on USAID is that what was the point of it? What was the point of it? And you look at a lot of the programs that were doing it, there clearly was no point of it. They were trying to find some point of it. We give aid. What do we give aid for? Well, in the old days, yeah, it was, we fought the commies. And if we could bribe some government or some movement or something to fight the commies along with us, we didn't care how corrupt that was. It was good. Now they're on our side. But now we're not in that kind of a world anymore. So these people are not sophisticated thinkers of what to do with government mission. And what you were saying, which is to what end, is the ultimate key. All right. So I am with them so far. But because the government is just such a monstrous bloat that honestly, what they're doing is fingernail parings. But to what end? What is do any of these people in the Trump administration have an image in their minds of once we take the government and we squeezed it and we broke it and we reshaped it and now it's going to do what? And I am not sure. I have not seen that anywhere. Some maybe marginal people to the Musk minions. There's this stuff.
Frustration about unresponsiveness. Government doesn't work. It doesn't do what you tell it to. You don't feel it in your life. And when you do feel it, it's often not felt in a good way. And particularly for the right, because the government is staffed by liberals, because liberals like the government better than the right does. You're more likely to work for the government if you're liberal. It gets even harder. Like you come in as a sort of anti-government disruptor like Donald Trump was in 2017, and you find you're stymied left and right by these procedures, by these processes, by these bureaucrats, by these civil servants. And so what you're trying to do is like break this power center that stands between the people and the government they elect. And I think a thing that I am personally surprised.
Times of the first Obama election, 2008, I guess, the Democrats were the ones who were trying to storm the institutions and change them.
Yeah, I think that the movement for the way he's humanizing it is through himself. And you were saying earlier this question of for what? What is at the end of all this breakage? What steady state are they trying to achieve? I found the Eric Adams thing extremely, extremely alarming and telling.
Why? Right. Eric Adams was charged with the most trivial of crimes. All right. Surely there are more important issues for the American people, for the citizens of New York City. Right. the President of the United States should have discretion with who he wants to prosecute over such trivial matters.
Because here's a guy who is under investigation for what appear to be pretty clear acts of corruption. He's a Democratic mayor, right? He's not somebody who Donald Trump needs to be loyal to. And it seems like what they...
But I think what the sensation is from the people on his side is here are all these bureaucrats, this deep state and these Democrats and so forth who have been lording it over us. And now they realize they're just like me. They're crying out just like we've been crying out, but they weren't listening when we cried. And now he's making them, cry out. So I think it's a case of the high being brought down as much as, and I'm not going to deny there's a huge personalistic aspect of Trump, starting with Trump himself. But I think as much of that as he is perceived as the hero who's bringing the high down low, all right? And that is very humanizing and it's very democratizing if you believe that that's what's happening.
Information sphere, right? Donald Trump is native to Twitter. You call him the Beethoven of Twitter. Elon Musk liked Twitter so much he bought it and then renamed it X. And I think it's true for a lot of people in that administration. Some of them are very native to podcasting as well. You are sort of suggesting this is a good thing. One thing that I worry about,
a fellow Cuban who said, suppose you take a time machine and go to the 30 Years' War, the bloodiest war that was ever fought in Europe, right? People were being slaughtered. And suppose you went there and you asked the man on the street, what do you think of the printing press? And the man on the street would say, it's the most horrific, conflict-inducing thing that has ever been invented. Look, over there, there's this little church. And over there, there's another little church. And they're coming out with their books. They're printed books. And the printed books have almost exactly the same words. But like 8 words are different. And they have to kill each other over that. If we didn't have a printing press, we'd be safe, right? Well, today we know that the printing press was the most liberating invention that ever happened in the human race. We had to get past that. And let's be thankful, I always say, building on Antonio's metaphor, we're not at a 30 Years' War level here. We're not anywhere near that. So I think we will get past it. I think information systems they cycle through moments of adjustments. My concern always has been that when we get to the end, I won't see it, by the way, but when we get to the end, we have liberal democracy still there, maybe even more democratic, because there are many things about the digital systems and AI that empower people far more than the old analog world did. So that's my answer.
Then always your final question. What are 3 books you recommend to the audience?
3 books. Okay, let's anything by Andre Mir. He is the Marshall McLuhan of the 21st century. But if I had to pick one, I would pick Post-Journalism and the Death of Newspapers, which is basically a history of the art form, a very detailed history of the art form, kind of explaining, and your newspaper is kind of front and center, explaining how the business model has changed from selling eyeballs to advertisers to sort of commodifying polarization, right? Beautiful book. Second one, I would say, a British economist, Paul Ormerod, has got a book called Why Most Things Fail. And you should read it, first of all, because it's a great title. Number 2, because as an economist, he's gone through the data, mostly British and American data that goes back 150 years, economic data, and tried to solve, basically the reason to try to solve issues like unemployment, segregated, ethnically segregated households. And it's a null hypothesis. Nothing has changed. So it's a fascinating book. Third, Hugo Mercier, Not Born Yesterday. And it's about what we talk about right now is can somebody like Elon Musk, Donald Trump, talk to you, a fairly liberal human being, and through the magic of his disinformation, suddenly you walk away thinking, I will vote for that man, whatever he goes, right? Can he persuade you through this manipulative process? And he has a lot of psychological data in there that pretty clearly explains, no, not really. People tend...
Yeah, people are not evolved to be gullible, all right? People are not usually gullible about things that are vital to their welfare. The West has decided a bright future isn't possible once citizens stop breeding, says Kip. Since this is happening now, would Luke prefer America be reseeded by robots or third worlders? Neither. Kip says, what the heck caused all Western countries to stop breeding the same way a white tiger and panda refuses to breed in captivity? Same problem, manifested area. But it has absolutely nothing to do with being white, right? East Asians have the problem perhaps even more severely than white people. So when you see a problem and then you personalize it just to white people and then you publicly present it as something that is just peculiarly ailing white people and this is a result of anti-white hatred when it has nothing to do with race, right? Plenty of things are race-related. Plenty of things, race is the most important factor to understand what's going on. But for many other things, race isn't important. And that advanced economies have low demographic replacement, all right, have low birth rates, right, has absolutely nothing to do with race, right? East Asians have the problem even more severely than Europeans. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.